We just got news a few minutes ago that China is retaliating again against the US retaliation, so it's hard to tell who's retaliating in what way at this point. But China's now saying they're at 125%, and Donald Trump saying that US tariffs are on China at 145%. So we're in the realm of just endless tit for tat, it seems, at this point. But the message very much from China is we are going to escalate if you're going to escalate. Whether that creates the room that Donald Trump is talking about for conversation at some point, it probably still does, because Xi Jinping and Donald Trump are both pragmatic enough to know that they probably should talk to each other if there is that opportunity. But how do you get agreement and understandings to talk in a climate like this? But certainly China sending the message again that they're not going to start to slow down in the face of Donald Trump's escalations on trade.
Yeah, and Christian, I guess this is, what everyone was waiting for. Does China kind of stand still and try to negotiate, or do they ratchet it up? Is this just going to escalate and escalate, or will there be common minds at some point?
Yeah, I think the uncomfortable thing for markets right now is this escalate to de-escalate idea. I mean, you've seen that to some extent with the reciprocal tariffs and the 90-day pause. Like, you had an escalation, and eventually there was a pivot. And the market has the same to some extent with the US and China. Where does it get worse enough? And the market never likes things it can extrapolate, and it never likes things that cause uncertainty. So the more you escalate, the more you cause uncertainty. So I think in summary, as of now, it seems like negotiations, escalations, and the market will price this increased uncertainty until you have to pivot.
Yeah. Who blinks first, Ross, I guess is the question, right? And is this just geopolitics, or is this about the economy? Yesterday, we also know that China really took quite a lot of time to try and figure out whether they could support the economy to a point where they felt comfortable, with an escalation.
Well, Xi Jinping probably feels fairly comfortable. I mean, they've done quite a lot of work in China to diversify their economy away from the US. You can see that in the way that the trade has risen with other places and the kinds of goods that they're shipping to the US versus what they're importing from the US. So they can possibly weather it a bit better in terms of the direct impact on consumers. For the US, it's much more direct hit on consumers. Xi Jinping is also doing a lot to try and boost consumption in China. We're expecting more from that, possibly even today, more announcements on stimulus from China designed to juice their own economy. But equally, they do have their own bases to think about here. Xi Jinping needs to look strong for his domestic base. Donald Trump needs to look strong that he's standing up to his own voters. So when you've got two leaders who both need to play to their bases, both need to look strong, how do you thread the needle through that to get to the point that you can talk to each other without looking like you blinked first? And so that's the difficulty. How do you navigate through this? They probably do want to talk to each other, but they can't be seen to be backing down.
I was going to say, what's the likelihood of the two leaders actually meeting?
Well, very unlikely they'll meet in person in the near term. Interestingly, we saw news today that Xi Jinping is inviting EU leaders to come to Beijing again. And that's a fairly regular thing. But the last visit was also to Beijing, so he wants to host them in Beijing. This is the Brussels leadership. We saw that news coming out this morning. So he's certainly making sure that he's keeping all his options open. A sit-down meeting, that's a really difficult thing to arrange. Even a phone call seems quite difficult at this point. But you'd have to start with phone calls and build up to a level of understanding to have a sit-down meeting.
Christian, when you look at, again, the market volatility has frankly been crazy this week. Yeah. I know Goldman also changed your call on a recession. With tariffs going up from the China side, is a recession in the U.S. even more likely?
Yeah, I mean, any tariff and any uncertainty is not good for growth and increases the risk of a recession. And I think the financial conditions tightening is really the most important thing to watch right now, because what you've seen yesterday is the equity market selling off together with the treasury market. Right. And that, to some extent, is a tightening of financial conditions, which shows us that's going to cost growth. And these financial condition shocks, according to our economists, go into growth very, very quickly. So in that regard, I think the kind of high-frequency indicator for recession risk is the market, and the market and the financial conditions are tightening, so recession risk is going up.